They came as shadows, bearing whispers older than stars. The air hung heavy with dust, clinging to everything like a second skin. The observation deck aboard the Dominion frigate Vigilant Measure had long since lost its luster, the polished metal surfaces pitted and corroded under centuries of neglect. Here, time seemed irrelevant, frozen in the amber of forgotten duty. Lieutenant Kalen Thren stood at the viewport, his breath fogging the glass despite the regulated temperature. Outside stretched the void, a sea of endless black flecked with distant suns, each one an indifferent witness to the chaos below. Kalen wasn't looking outward anymore. His gaze was fixed inward, tracing patterns in the swirling motes of dust that danced lazily in the low gravity. He had been here for days, perhaps weeks. It didn't matter which. Time had become meaningless in this place where only silence reigned supreme. The Dominion rarely spoke of what happened here, only that it mattered. And so he waited. A soft chime broke the stillness. The ship's systems were calling him again. He turned reluctantly, knowing what awaited him. The holographic display flickered to life, projecting an image of Commander Vareni, her face carved with lines of strain. Her voice was calm but brittle when she spoke. "Lieutenant Thren," she began, her tone measured yet tinged with urgency. "The survey teams have returned." Kalen felt a chill run through him, though whether it was from the news or something deeper, he couldn't say. "What did they find?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. "They found echoes," Vareni replied, her eyes darting briefly toward the horizon of the viewport behind her. "Echoes of something long dead." Kalen's heart quickened. "Echoes of what?" Vareni hesitated, then gestured to a cluster of images scrolling across the display. They showed fragments of wreckage, metallic shards, scorched hulls, and jagged debris scattered across a barren moon. But it wasn't the destruction that caught his attention. It was the symbols etched into the remains, strange sigils that pulsed faintly with an inner light. "The Harbingers of Dust," Vareni murmured, almost to herself. "They've been here." Kalen frowned. "Who?" She looked at him directly then, her expression grim. "Humanity." The word hung in the air like a blade unsheathed. Humanity, a name once synonymous with extinction. A species erased from the great chorus, its memory scoured from every archive. Yet here they were, in the remnants of a forgotten battle, whispering their return. "Their presence is faint," Vareni continued, her fingers hovering over the controls. "But it's unmistakable. These markings, they match those found on the ruins of Chorus 9. Kalen stiffened. Chorus 9. The first human world to fall during the Silence War. Its destruction was etched into Dominion doctrine as a paragon of victory. To find its signature here, on this desolate moon, was nothing short of sacrilege. "What does it mean?" Kalen asked, his voice low. "Why are they here?" Vareni shook her head, her expression unreadable. "We don't know yet. But whatever they want, it won't end well for us." As if to punctuate her words, the ship shuddered. Alarms blared, their tones harsh and urgent. The lights flickered, casting shifting shadows across the room. Kalen gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. "What is that?" he demanded, turning back to the viewport. Vareni's expression darkened. "It seems our guests have arrived." Outside, the void shimmered with light. At first it was just a flicker, a distortion in the fabric of space itself. Then, like a veil lifting, shapes emerged from the darkness. Ships, massive, angular vessels unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen. Their hulls gleamed with an iridescent sheen, as if they were forged from the very stars themselves. And on each ship, the same sigil pulsed faintly, a reminder of the past they sought to reclaim. "They're here," Vareni said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Harbingers of Dust." Kalen stared out at them, his mind racing. These were no ordinary invaders. These were echoes of a forgotten war, revenants risen from the ashes of a time long buried. And they carried a message, one that would shake the Dominion to its core. The Harbingers of dust have come, bearing the weight of 1,000 tombs. The Dominion fleet braced for impact. Vessels aligned in perfect formation, their shields glowing with a pulsating energy. The Harbingers of dust moved with calculated precision, their ships weaving through the void like dancers performing an ancient ritual. Each movement was deliberate, each trajectory precise, as if the invaders knew exactly what they were doing and why. Commander Vareni watched the unfolding spectacle from the command center, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the tactical overlay. The screens displayed every angle of the approaching armada, their signatures marked in stark red against the Dominion blue. The numbers told the story. 12 vessels, each larger than any ship the Dominion had encountered in decades. They were not here to negotiate. They were here to judge. "Target their engines," Vareni ordered, her voice firm but tinged with unease. "Disable them before they reach firing range." Lieutenant Kalen stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the screen. He had seen enough battles to recognize the telltale signs of a disciplined assault force. These ships weren't here to destroy, they were here to deliver a message written in fire and steel. "Sir," a technician called out, his voice tense. "The Harbingers aren't responding to our hails." Vareni clenched her jaw. "Understood. Prepare countermeasures." The Dominion fleet unleashed its arsenal, targeting the approaching vessels with precision. Rail cannons roared, their projectiles streaking through the void with devastating accuracy. Lasers lanced out, carving through the Harbingers' outer hulls. But the invaders seemed unaffected. Their shields shimmered briefly, absorbing the blows without faltering. "What are they made of?" Kalen muttered, watching the damage reports scroll across the screen. "Nothing should survive that kind of firepower." Vareni didn't answer. Instead, she focused on the tactical map, her brow furrowed in concentration. The Harbingers' movements were erratic yet coordinated, as if they were playing a game of chess with the Dominion. Each move was calculated, each countermeasure anticipated. It was as if they knew the Dominion's every weakness. "Prepare boarding parties," Vareni said finally. "We need eyes on these ships." Kalen nodded, his mind racing. Boarding operations were risky at best, especially against unknown adversaries. But the alternative, letting these Harbingers dictate the terms of engagement, was unthinkable. If humanity had returned, they would demand answers. And the Dominion would be forced to provide them. Meanwhile, aboard one of the Harbingers, Captain Ilara Voss stood at the bridge, her cybernetic eye glowing softly in the dim light. She had spent decades preparing for this moment, studying the Dominion's tactics, their weaknesses, their fears. Humanity's return was not a conquest. It was a reckoning, and she would see it through. "Status report," she said, her voice calm but commanding. The crew responded with efficiency, their movements fluid and practiced. "Shields holding, weapons online," the weapons officer reported. "Enemy fleet is engaging." Ilara nodded, her mind already 2 steps ahead. "Maintain current course. Deploy probes." On the screen, small drones detached from the Harbingers, their purpose clear. These were not weapons. They were messengers, carrying the weight of 1,000 tombs. Each probe bore the sigil of Chorus 9, a reminder of the Dominion's atrocities. They were meant to provoke, to remind the Dominion of the price of forgetting. "Captain," a voice called out. "Probes are being intercepted." Ilara's eye narrowed. "Let them intercept. It's what we came for." Back aboard the Dominion flagship, the probes appeared suddenly in the tactical display, their signatures blinking ominously. Vareni watched as they approached, her heart pounding. These were not ordinary probes. They were relics, fragments of a time long gone. And they carried a message that could not be ignored. "Orders?" the tactical officer asked, his voice steady. Vareni hesitated, her gaze locked on the probes. "Bring them aboard. Analyze their contents." The probes docked with the Dominion ship, their casings opening to reveal their contents. Inside lay artifacts, pieces of Chorus 9, fragments of human history that the Dominion had tried so hard to erase. Each item was meticulously preserved, a testament to the resilience of a people thought lost forever. "What do they want?" Kalen asked, his voice tinged with awe. Vareni didn't answer. Instead, she turned to the artifact analysis team, her expression grim. "Find out." As the Dominion scrambled to decode the messages, the Harbingers prepared for their next move. Ilara stood at the helm, her hand resting lightly on the console. This was more than a battle, it was a trial. A trial of memory, of justice, of the right to exist. "We are not here to conquer," she said, her voice carrying across the bridge. "We are here to remind you of what you forgot. To remind you of what you destroyed." Her words echoed through the void, carried on the wind of 1,000 tombs. The Dominion listened, their resolve wavering. For the first time in millennia, they faced a foe not driven by conquest, but by truth. And the truth was a weapon far more potent than any gun or cannon. In the silence of the void, the Harbingers of Dust delivered their verdict. The Dominion fleet fell silent, its crew staring in stunned disbelief at the artifacts recovered from the probes. Each piece told a story of survival, of resilience, of a people who refused to be erased. The sigils of Chorus 9 glowed faintly in the dim light, their power resonating through the ship's systems. It was as if the artifacts themselves were alive, bearing witness to a truth the Dominion had tried so desperately to bury. Commander Vareni stood motionless, her mind racing. The Harbingers were not here to fight, they were here to expose. To expose the Dominion's crimes, to remind them of the price of forgetting. And they had succeeded. The evidence was undeniable. "Captain," the tactical officer whispered, his voice trembling, "the Harbingers are withdrawing." Vareni blinked, snapping out of her trance. "What? Why?" The tactical officer pointed to the screen, where the Harbingers' ships were retreating into the void, leaving behind only the faintest trace of their presence. It was as if they had delivered their message and vanished, leaving the Dominion to grapple with the implications. "Do we pursue?" Kalen asked, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. Vareni shook her head. "No, let them go. For now." The Harbinger's departure left the Dominion fleet in a state of turmoil. Questions swirled in the minds of every crew member. Questions about the past, about justice, about the future. The Dominion had always prided itself on its order, its control, its ability to suppress dissent. But the Harbingers had shattered that illusion, revealing cracks in the foundation of their empire. Back aboard the Harbingers, Captain Ilara Voss stood at the bridge, her cybernetic eye glowing softly in the dim light. She had achieved her mission. The Dominion now knew the truth. Whether they would act on it remained to be seen. For now, the Harbingers withdrew, their work done. But Ilara knew this was only the beginning. Humanity's return was inevitable, and the Dominion would soon learn the full extent of their mistakes. As the Harbingers disappeared into the void, the Dominion fleet watched in silence. The implications of what they had just witnessed were staggering. The Harbingers were not here to conquer, they were here to remind. To remind the Dominion of the cost of forgetting, of the consequences of erasing a people's history. And they had succeeded. Call to action, Side. This is Chronicles of the Lost, a series exploring the echoes of a forgotten past. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the channel and watch the rest of the series in the playlist below. Together, we will uncover the secrets of a galaxy torn apart by memory and vengeance.